Kia ora and welcome to Rotorua, the centre stage for the Indigenous Weavers International Symposium 2010. This is a world gathering for experts in both traditional and contemporary weaving. The focus of this symposium is on the retention of cultural knowledge and the use of educational tools and processes for conserving natural weaving resources for future generations. It is expected to attract at least 150 weavers and international speakers to explore techniques and concepts of weaving through forum presentations, exhibitions, practical workshops, as well as excursions to iconic landscapes that contribute to narratives in the fibre arts.
Te Aroa is my waka and Te Aroa is my iwi, and although I am Emily Schuster's daughter, I was introduced to weaving by my grandmother. Mum just believed when you were ready to weave you would come and learn, but my kuia was of the old mould where once you were old enough to learn, you had to learn, because here in Rotorua making piupus, making kete was an income. And when you could contribute to the daily income or money, you had to learn. And so at 10 years old, my nanny made us sit and learn. And it wasn't just the simple things. It was, you're into piupus, you got to start making piupus, which to some people is quite hard. The majority would be starting with a basic food basket or something like that. But nanny made us sit there and learn to weave. And although I thought she was an old battle axe, really hard at the time, I believe she sowed the seed within me way back then to do what I do now. And I think because out of 5 girls, Mum had 5 girls, only my twin sister and I, who were left with our kuia, followed the weaving path. Carried on weaving. Yeah. So Mum started the weaving school at the New Zealand Māori Arts and Crafts. It's called New Zealand Māori Arts and Crafts at Te Puia, okay? And Te Puia firstly was introduced as a name change purely for marketing reasons. It was hard. We had the Whakarewarewa Māori village and the Whakarewarewa thermal wonderland, and they were getting mixed up in marketing of. So Te Puia, which is a fortress within the New Zealand Māori Arts and Crafts, an old past site, they named it Te Puia, and it has made that separation. But Mum started the weaving school up there 40 years ago now, and of course with her starting it, she passed away when she was still the head up there, and one of her students at the time carried on that role. Then she finished, and the powers that be wanted that same Emily Schuster's puna, the pool of her teaching. So my twin sister was approached to go back to Te Puia and teach. Then she passed away now. I'm there. It's just a legacy that's happening. And women that I have taught, because of whom I was taught by, are carrying on in the school. As a rōpū, the networks are important. As Indigenous people, with our invited overseas guests, they're important. As I said, the similarities within our people for so many Indigenous people, for not just craft, but for health, for everything, is important. And to have our overseas guests speak to our audience of New Zealand weavers, some of them, this is their first time experiencing or listening to the presentation by Teresa Secord this morning, they're realising, gosh, it's just, they're talking about kinners or sea urchins, they're talking about the rivers and the lakes or the water, the land. It's all just so similar yet a bit different.
The retention of cultural knowledge through the eyes, minds and hands of international and local fibre artists and weavers will see the symposiums showcase history, values, beliefs, artworks and behaviour of Indigenous peoples here this week. E tika ana me mihi atu kia rātou mā nā rātou te huarahi ipara I roto i ngā mahiraranga. Our tipuna Ngoingoi Pewhairangi initiated the resurgence in traditional weaving alongside our master weavers, Dame Rangi Marie Hettit, Emily Schuster, Kath Brown and Diggerus Te Kanawa.
And for me, the retention of cultural knowledge is exactly that, is what you are learning and what you are producing with your precious hands, your mind, all your faculties, is exactly what our people, our kaumātua, our kuia, did for us. So they had retained their knowledge, their culture, their tikanga, the mana, everything that pieces and contributes to retention. So we might talk about retention, but there are several modes of retention that people have in whatever they do. So for me, it's about a practical and visual, and also about the narratives that we incorporate in the weaving that actually speaks. So it's going back to the oral language, which is visual, and the weaving and the fibres that are selected to weave are the tools in which to consolidate the narrative. So there's a little bit of the visual and the language as we know it today, as in the reo, the spoken language, but it's not to lose sight of the visual language, which is the tool that we spring off, you see. So the retention from an Indigenous viewpoint means the symposium is actually bringing together a number of our brothers and sisters from overseas who, yes, we are living in different parts of the world, but we have the same thinkings, we have the same hiccups, and not only with mainstream, but with our own people. So there are some that really take a serious look at how we want to look at the retention. And so this is, it's going to work in twofold, like I mentioned earlier, from a practical sense, but I've actually moved personally into an academic area so that the credibility comes through the practice, and so that people who look at weavers don't look at us as just weavers who make kits and pew-pews. There's more to us than that, and really looking at the realm of hine te iwewa, and we have the practitioner and all the other practices that go with it. So it's not about just doing one part of it, it's about appreciating the realm that contributes to the retention. Mm-hmm. But I think the educational tools goes more than just the weaving. It goes back to the land, it goes back to your tribal affiliation, it goes back to the appropriateness. But for me, ideally, it's really looking at the cycle of matariki. And if we work with matariki, it aligns us with nature and nature with us. Before I had mokopuna, I was actually thinking about mokopuna. And I have two boys, and I'm a widow. And I wanted to look at, okay, when I have mokopuna, this is how I'm going to contribute to their learning. So I had imaginary mokopuna, and I would write notes or look at pieces or create pieces where I want to make evident where I started, where I finished. And if it's a not showing, it didn't matter. So I was really looking at all the clues that's going to assist the mokopuna that would read into the work that I create, whether it be in a woven piece or in my visual diary or a travel journal, and I'd leave little messages. So the visual diaries and the travel journal, it's like I'm talking to the mokopuna. But now I do have mokopuna. I have 7 of them, and they're all under 6.5. But it's beautiful, you know. And I said to my older son, I said, well, when your daughter turns 3, she's going to come with me all the time.
mauri ka tau kuru te papa e takoto nei. Ei, tēnā te mauri. Te mauri ka tau kuru te menenga e tau nei. Ui, wero, hau mai te mauri, hau mi e hui e. Toi te kau te e paru atua e te pūke ko te taure tēnei rangi tī waka e reira. Ko pai tia ki te pulihira. Tō pitini a te mauri te rana te tihi o whakatō ki tupo te rangi te pito te rangi. Takatara wana te mauri na te wātu matau e ruku o tū matau e riri. Hurihia i te rāwhiti te malagai. Kua e Hurihia materi ua takahua tāri a rangi o tāri te waiora. Ui karo haramai te toki hauki e hui e. Toi e te kawa tēnei ka i oma te o kore e tiki o te rangi. Te rāhanga tapu o rewa o maua rewa ki tapu o rewa o tapu o maranui. Te taumatoa kātua o rangi nui, rangi no, rangi mauri, rangi pōtaki, rangi petuma, rangi pēkere. Te ao nui, te ao mēle, te ao mētara. Te uruhanga te hohoi ngā tāne te kapu ko te rangi nau wari ki ko te ao tūroa ko pūhau rangi. Pēnera ngā taka ngā wiu, ngā wāranga, ngā tāna, ngā tāna, te pōho, ngā tāna te ao ai o. A wakamau o te rā ki ngā pakea ko te rā ko te pai o matua kore. Pērikine kore te rangi tū haha. Toi e te wāranga o te pūkenga o te wāre te tūtaua. Pan, harawai te toki, haumi e hui e, tāi e.
Ka takina te kawa, ko te kawa nui, ko te kawa roa, ko te kawa whakatike. Ko te kawa i ahua mai no tiki o te rani. Tipu ko te pū, ko te weo, ko te rito, ko te take, ko te pūkena, ko te wānana, ko te taura, ko te tauira. Tēnei rā te awhinuku te awhirani. Nō te ororo i o matua. Ipu e ia i te take, ue nuku i ue rani. Tēnei ko hoho ki runa ki te tipua, ki runa ki te tawhito, ki runa ki te kāhui o nāriki. Ia putara e nei tāona ki te whaiau, ki te amarama. Uhi, wero, tau mai te mauri haumi e. Hui e i taiki e. Ka takina no te kawa. Whakaronora e tāne ki te ahurewa, ki te pūkena, ki te wānana, ki te taura, ki te tauira. Tipuna, puna, weuna, rito, nā take i te ororo, ui te ororo. Tēnei rā te whakahua ke i ngā maunga tapu. Ko tipua o te rani, ko tawhito o te rani. Takea mai ko te tapu, ko te mana, ko te mauri o nā atua. I hohaua mai no i o matua kore. A whakatākina ki runa ki e nei tāuna. Ia mahea rā te hua mā kihi ki runa ki tēnei papa. He papa tāta ki nō whatinuku nō whatirani. Ua tēnā whakaeke ke atu ki te rani. Uhi, wero, tau mai te mauri haumi e. Ui e, taiki e. Ka takina no te kawa. Te uruna tū, te uruna tapu, te mauri tū, te mauri tapu. Te mauri te whiwhia, te mauri te rawea, te mauri no whea. Te mauri no runa, no rani, no nuku tū. Tēnei te mauri ka whakapiki, tēnei te mauri ka whakakake. Te mauri o nā hariki, te mauri o nā tipua, te mauri e rani. Ka putara ki te whaia, ki te amarama. Uhi, wero, tau mai te mauri haumi e. Hui e, taiki e.
It's just a little karakia we use when we're going out anywhere. Everything's got a Māori and you just like to kia tau ai te Māori. Te urunga tū, te urunga tapu. Te Māori tū, te Māori tapu. Te Māori te whiwhia, te Māori te rawea. Te Māori no hea, te Māori no runga, no rangi, no nuku tū. Tēnei te Māori ka whakapiki, tēnei te Māori ka whakakake. Te Māori o ngā tipua, te Māori o ngā atua. Kia whakaputa ai ki te ao mārama, ki te whaiao. Uhi wero, tau mai te Māori. Hui e, tai.
Three parts, equal parts of these leaves soaked in water, cold water that is, brings and emerge just the leaves, not a lot of too much thick branch, and then boiled. And the whey, or the solution, mordant, is used to soak the muka in, the fibre, the harakeke, flax fibre. Actually, while I'm standing here, flax, harakeke, quite different. We have the flax linen, and most of you probably know that, but for some, they don't. Simply, it's commonly known as New Zealand flax because Captain Cook called it flax. It's harakeke, or korare, as some people say, korare. Okay, so I just thought I'd add that in. So that's for the wai. The other component is the hino. The hino. This maiwai is made out of tawhiro, karamuramu, what we call karamuramu. This has an orange berry on it. Pack it into your pot, cover it with water, bring it to the boil, and then simmer it. And just watch it, because if you boil it too hard, obviously you're going to lose liquid. So we don't get it. Simmer it. 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours. Waiwai. The waiwai for the waiwai is your mordant for your paru. So without your waiwai, you're not going to get your colour out of your paru. It's not going to hurt if it goes through the tanakaha in particular. Probably it might change your colour a bit with the roreko, but if you want to dye some black muka, you need to put your muka into the waiwai now. And when we do our workshops, we use 2 hours in the waiwai, dry, and then 2 hours in the paru. When you get tanakaha bark, you're not necessarily going to use it straight away. Keep it in water, soak it, and the colour will start to come out into your water, even then. But it does need to be broken up.
Yeah.
You can use kohatu. We've got some little modern technology to help us just speed the process up today. Okay? So you just need something hard to beat it on. And so it's team.
The work that we do at our longhouse at Evergreen is to support and promote the work of the weavers. We see them at the core of cultural preservation, and it's so beautiful when people come together from different cultures. And whether you're an established master weaver considered in your field, or if you're someone here who's here to learn, it's easy sometimes for people to feel a little bit intimidated when they first get here and look around and see the glorious works that other people have done. But then as people get to know each other, then we all realize that everyone does have something to teach and to share, whether it's a new weaving technique or an opportunity to try new materials, or if it's something from their specific culture and a perspective that maybe someone hasn't thought of before. So no matter what level you're coming in as a weaver, or even as one who supports weavers, you're going to be able to learn something beautiful, and you're going to be able to bring something that only you can bring with your unique perspective as an Indigenous person. And so on a professional level, partly why I'm here is to honor those relationships that have developed. And I like to joke that if we want to know what we will be doing in the United States in a few years, we'll just come and see what the Maori people are doing now. Because we find that the Maori people are very visionary and very forward-thinking. And so there's a lot to learn. So professionally, I'm able to look at how symposia such as the IWI Symposium is brought together, what kind of protocols are utilized, how are the interactions preserved and documented? Because it's beautiful to have a gathering, but then how can you add life to what was exchanged and learned and experienced by all the participants? So there's always something to learn. We hosted an international gathering in 2001 at the Evergreen State College Longhouse, and we had the artists working in separate studios, and we thought, well, that would be great because then they can really focus in on their work. But then when we came back to Te Mata in Hastings in 2005, then I could see the value of co-locating the workshops so that a weaver would feel very free to go in and try their hand at printmaking, painting. The carvers got a chance to be out in the meadow behind the longhouse learning to do the haka. And so I was able to learn many things, including how people can fully engage just by being within the same space.
Human being try to think and try to feel. So they need culture and tradition, different from water or food, I think. In 1966, our nature indigo was dramatically decreasing. So for our nature indigo, maintaining of the tradition is very, very difficult. By 1985, the production of our natural indigo is increasing to 500%. It is, I think, it is miracle because in Japan, anyway, Japan is modern country, special technology and high technology country, I think. So for us, opening of information, professional information and exchange traditional information is very important for maintaining traditional and culture. Only 5 indigo farms continue its tradition. All family business. If we can continue to use 1,000 bags of our natural indigo, they can maintain their technique. So I want to add 5 indigo farms, 3 full-time, part-time. For me, 3 full-time indigo farmers, very important. Because if we can buy 1,000 bags of our natural indigo, they can continue as a job. It is very important. Long ago, we use only kimono, our natural indigo dye, traditional dye stuff, so only kimono. But now, kimono is not popular because wearing is very difficult. I want that kimono industry become main industry, but I hope, but it is very difficult. I can understand, they can understand. This year, we try to, nice fashion designer, he lives in Tokushima, so we asked him to make outfits for young people. I don't know it is impossible or not, but anyway, I have to try, because young people like cool something. Not only traditional, they are not interested in only traditional feeling, so cool something. So I want young people to notice the importance of traditional something.
And I'm a member of the Penobscot Indian Nation from the state of Maine in the United States. Our tribe has been making baskets for thousands of years, and our materials are ash, which is a tree, and sweetgrass, which is something that we gather at the coast. I've actually been working with these traditional indigenous materials for 21 years now. We actually have a whole economy associated with our gathering process, in that the trees have to be cut down by men and hand harvested. Yeah, well, the other material that we're really close to is that we weave with is the sweetgrass, and in our language it's called mesquiqua. And I have many fond memories collecting sweetgrass with my grandmother, and there's a special sweetgrass song, a gathering song that I can hear still today. And I'm fortunate enough to be using the same tools that were handed down to me by my great-grandmother. So tools that came actually from her father from the 1800s now. And so, you know, there's a lot of ceremony involved in the sweetgrass gathering, and then the women work together to dry the grass, to comb it, and even we have sweetgrass braiding parties. And those are really special times where a lot of the stories will come out, and the elders, particularly in the Passamaquoddy and Penobscot tribes who still speak the language, will share that and share, you know, just a different terminology that's being lost really rapidly. When I was learning to make baskets, I worked with an elder on the Indian Island Reservation at our tribe. The name of that village is Benawapskek. And I was finishing up getting a master's degree in geology. And so they hired me to come back and work for the tribe and, you know, work with all of our resources, the natural resource department. And I realized really soon on that I was one of only about a dozen people younger than the age of 50 who was now learning this tradition that we had been carrying on for thousands of years. So about 55 of us formed the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance between the 4 tribes in Maine, who are the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy. And at the time, our average age was 63. So since 1993, our date of formation, we've actually lowered the average age in the past 17 years to 40. And there are now about 100 weavers, again, statewide. The thing that's interesting about our basketry and over the time period, too, since we formed our organization, is that the basket prices have really skyrocketed from, say, $30 in 1993 when we formed to $300 and $3,000. So we have been able to attract the next generation to stick with it. There are some young men that are really phenomenal weavers. One is commanding prices of upwards of $5,000–$6,000 for his pieces. I'm really fascinated by the similarities, you know, across culture. When you look at different weaving traditions around the world, you see that, you know, all of our fish traps, you know, are woven in almost the same form. You know, where they're kind of conical shape for the fish to swim in and not out. And I think, you know, there's so much to share in terms of the work that we've been doing for, you know, the next generation focus, and then the work here with the language and the schools, I think, is really a great model. Everyone talks about it, you know, in native North America, that you have to come to New Zealand and see how they're saving language. I mean, we're down to a few hundred speakers statewide, which actually I'm told is quite a lot in a 6,000 person population, that having 400 or 500 speakers is actually a relatively high percentage.
I have many students, and there are many that have become very passionate about what they're doing, but they don't have the koko or the blood. They don't have the deep desire to understand what our ancestors did. They're not all that aware, unless I share it with them, about our native bird species, the materials that were used to gather them, the respect that you have for the aina or the land, and the all of the wau out in the forest, those things that are important to our artwork. Because if it weren't for the aina and Mother Earth, we wouldn't have the trees. If we didn't have the trees, we wouldn't have the birds. If we didn't have the birds, we wouldn't have the life that's in them. This morning, in fact, I walked down the highway where I'm staying at Tina's home and listening to the breeze, listening to the rustling of the trees. And so, you know, to put that into words to students is sometimes very different. But when it's in your own family and they've been raised around it, I'm really fortunate that I lived with my parents. And I have a brother and sister, but as young adults, they left home and wished, now that, you know, they're older adults, that they could have been a part of Mama and Daddy's life. And I count my blessings because I did. And then my children were born and raised around my parents. A gift that I think is so special when you have your ohana there with you. If you lose one or the other, but you still have one that you can draw upon. If you lose your parent early on, if you're raised by an auntie or an uncle or a great-grandmother who has the passion of the work that you're doing, then it continues to grow. I feel really fortunate that my daughter and my son were raised with my parents because they came to know the art and what being Hawaii was for them at the time. My mo'opuna, born and raised with us almost all her life. She's now 22. She knows about this art. She fortunately was a student of Punanaleo, Kohangareo, and so in the language use within the art, my mo'opuna does it better than I do. I'm not a native speaker, but I've given her the passion and the understanding of what it is that our ancestors had. So tool-wise, what they used to gather was their hands. When they made the cordage to make these ahu and the mahiole, the capes and the helmets and the lei, the cordage that was used was called olona. And this again was all by hand primarily, and adze, and very sharp coral. In the Hawaiian Islands, there's no metal. So the tools were limited to coral, shell, bone, stone. And so it was sharpening the adze, sharpening the coral to use like sandpaper and such. The cordage was olona. They used some coconut, but mostly it was olona, which was very, very sturdy. And watching the muka being made, the flax and scoring and shredding and getting your threads and then twisting it on the leg and such, where the olona, they would watch the plant to make sure that they were growing nice and tall. The outer bark was very much like hibiscus. It was very rough, and they would try to keep it clipped back of any leaves and such so that it would get nice and tall. And then they would cut only certain sections, and they could take that stalk and place it in the ground and replant, and it would grow again.
Well, kia ora mai tātou. Well, here we all are, Saturday night, and here we all are. Welcome to the Indigenous Wearable International Symposium, Wearable Extravaganza. Welcome. So tonight, for your viewing pleasure, we have brought together a diverse group of artisans and designers working in a variety of textiles. Woven works from natural fibres in whatu, tāniko and raranga, and streetwear that reflects and is inspired by the processes of weaving. Our designers tonight are Zarina Wilson, Janine Clarkin, Donna Campbell, Bonnie Marshall, Amber Bridgman, Shona Tafiao, the Te Puia Collection, Hana Wainoho, Maile Andrade, hope she's out there, and Paulette Kanepuna from Hawaii with a collection of shawls and portai and feather work. And lastly but not least, Miyoko Kawahito. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā.
This week has brought together artists who have been able to exchange ideas, weaving techniques, and the most important part has been the bringing together of like minds. The sharing passion and inspiration of such a gathering holds true to the traditions of our ancestors. One key element that had a recurring theme throughout the 6 days of this spectacular event was the way in which the forums and unofficial discussions took place. Every attendee soon talked about the depletion of resources and the sustainability and retention of those resources. The knowledge which keeps a culture alive is entrenched in traditional weaving methods. Natural materials are so important in keeping a culture alive and thriving. This has been proven by the large number of participants at this Indigenous Weavers International Symposium 2010. Finally, a proverb from the late Sir Apirana Ngata, which aptly describes all Indigenous peoples and cultures. He aha te mea nui o tēnei ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. For what is the most important thing in this world? It is people, it is people, it is people.